bands have ever burned as bright or as recklessly as Mötley Crüe. The Sunset Strip, sold-out arenas, the top of the world, and 4 people doing everything they could to lose it all. This is the girls, girls, girls era. Let's get into it. In the summer of 1987, Mötley Crüe walked out onto stages across America as the biggest rock band on the planet. Sold-out arenas, private jets, a #2 album behind only Whitney Houston, which Nikki Sixx, for the record, found deeply suspicious. From the outside, it looked like the dream. 4 guys from the gutter of Los Angeles who had clawed their way to the absolute top. From the inside, according to the people who were actually there, it was something else entirely. This is the story of the girls, girls, girls era. 6 months of recording sessions that nearly didn't happen, and a tour so far off the rails that their own management quietly began to wonder if some of them would make it home. The band walked into the studio in November of 1986. Elektra Records wanted a new album. Management wanted it done in 2 months. What followed was 4 months of some of the most chaotic recording sessions in rock history. The problem wasn't talent. Nikki Sixx had the songs. The problem, as multiple band members have described it over the years, was getting 4 people into the same room at the same time in any condition resembling functional. Vince Neil, according to Sixx's account in the band's memoir The Dirt, was trying to stay sober and failing miserably. Tommy Lee had just married actress Heather Locklear and was now trying to maintain the appearance of a normal life while concealing the scale of what he was doing when he wasn't home. He later reflected in The Dirt that the album should have taken 2 months. It took 4 because it wasn't unusual, in his own words, for one or more of them to simply vanish for a day or 2. Mick Mars said almost nothing about what he was going through. His degenerative spinal condition, ankylosing spondylitis, a disease where the vertebrae slowly fuse together, had worsened significantly. He was in constant pain, fighting depression, getting through sessions however he could. He just showed up and played. And then there was Nikki Sixx, the band's chief songwriter, the engine of the whole machine, and a man who was, by his own account in the Heroin Diaries, so deep into heroin addiction that his skin had turned yellow. At Tommy Lee's wedding earlier that year, where Sixx served as best man, Lee wrote in The Dirt that Sixx kept disappearing to the bathroom and coming back, nodding off mid-conversation. Lee's words, he couldn't believe Sixx was shooting up at his own wedding. Management staged an intervention. They brought in a celebrity drug counselor named Bob Timmons. Sixx walked out. Timmons followed him into the parking lot and convinced him to try getting clean without checking into rehab. According to multiple accounts, it didn't take. This was the band, trying to make their most important album yet. Somehow, against all reasonable odds, they finished it. Girls, Girls, Girls was released on May 15, 1987. The title, according to Tommy Lee, came directly from life. Every city, every tour stop. The first thing they do was find the strip clubs, and every one of them had the same flashing neon sign out front. Lee said the phrase had burned itself into his brain. The songs on the record were rawer and darker than anything they'd done before. Wild Side was Sixx writing about buying heroin on Sunset Boulevard, driving his blacked-out Mercedes to the corner, scoring from dealers who kept product in balloons in their mouths. In a Rolling Stone interview years later, Sixx described it plainly. He saw a lot of things down on that stretch of Sunset, and he wrote about all of it. The album debuted at #2 on the Billboard 200. It would go on to sell 4 million copies in the United States alone. Elektra Records exhaled, and then Mötley Crüe went on the road. The Girls, Girls, Girls tour kicked off on June 19, 1987 in Tucson, Arizona. The stage show was built to match the album's Biker Sleaze energy, an inflatable Harley, walls of pyrotechnics, and Tommy Lee on a drum riser that could spin his entire kit completely upside down while he kept playing. Night after night, The crowd lost their minds. Opening the tour was Whitesnake, already a massive act in their own right. Later in the run, they were replaced by a young band from Los Angeles that almost nobody outside the Sunset Strip had heard of yet. Their name was Guns N' Roses. From the first show, the tour operated on a principle that everyone understood, but nobody said out loud. No rules, no limits, no consequences. At least, that's how it felt at the time. Tommy Lee has said in interviews that the entire Girls, Girls, Girls tour was a blur. Not a metaphor, a literal blur. Weeks that dissolved, cities he couldn't account for. What stuck were the details too strange to forget. One of those was the car. In the Dirt, Lee described how throughout the tour, the band had a drug dealer who followed their tour bus in a white Excalibur, a stretch luxury car, with a custom license plate that read simply, Dealer. Lee recalled that every time the bus stopped and the band stepped out, the Excalibur would appear. A man in gold chains and a diamond Rolex would climb out and start distributing cocaine to the band and crew like it was a completely normal part of the job. Eventually, the record label found out, not because of the drugs themselves, but because they were worried about the visibility. The fear was police attention. Management cut the Excalibur loose. Meanwhile, at the other end of the touring party, Mick Mars played every show. He didn't talk about the pain he was in. He didn't explain why he moved differently than he used to. He didn't tell anyone that his spine was slowly fusing itself together, one vertebra at a time. He just plugged in and played every night, while everything around him got further out of control. Here's the thing about Motley Crüe on the Girls, Girls, Girls tour. The chaos didn't only happen in the dark. Sometimes it happened in the catering room before the show even started. August 25th, 1987, Rochester, New York. Vince Neil is backstage, making himself a sandwich. He wanted French's yellow mustard. What was on the catering table was Grey Poupon Dijon. According to multiple accounts, Vince had been asking management to fix the rider for weeks. Yellow mustard. Every show, nobody fixed it. So he picked up the jar and threw it against the wall. The jar exploded back at him. Severed tendons, nerves, and an artery in his hand. Nearly took a finger off entirely. The show was canceled. Neil was airlifted to a hand specialist in Baltimore where he underwent an 8-hour operation. A full cast to his elbow for a month. 3 months of bandages after that. Management's official statement to the press was that a bottle of mustard had, quote, exploded in his hand while he made himself a hamburger. Which was not entirely wrong. Nikki Sixx was backstage waiting to play that show. He wrote about it that same night in the Heroin Diaries. His words, Vince is such an asshole sometimes. He reached for the mustard. There was only Grey Poupon, which he hates, so he threw the jar against the wall. It exploded and cut his hand wide open. He's now at the hospital, and we're still waiting to play the show. Nice move, bro. Can we say spoiled brat? Motley Crue's head of tour security, Fred Saunders, also recalled it in the Heroin Diaries. His assessment, I couldn't believe it. Neither could the fans still sitting in the arena waiting for a show that was never going to happen. Back on the road, while the tour kept rolling through the rest of the summer, Tommy Lee and Nikki Sixx had found their own way to pass the time between shows. According to The Dirt, the band's own memoir, at some point during the Girls, Girls, Girls tour, Lee and Sixx made a bet. The terms, who could go the longest without showering, leather pants, summer heat, sold-out arenas every night, and still successfully hook up with a groupie. Tommy Lee, the man married to Heather Locklear, Dynasty. T.J. Hooker, America's sweetheart, was on a tour bus somewhere in the Midwest seeing how long he could go without a shower. According to The Dirt, they went weeks. It ended when a groupie got sick on Nikki. Tommy Lee won. Years later, in a 2009 Metal Hammer interview, Lee reflected on the entire Girls, Girls, Girls era. His words, "We were beautifully broken, functionally dysfunctional. It seemed to us that we had our shit together, but we were really fucked up." Looking at the mustard incident and the hygiene bed existing on the same tour, it's hard to argue with the man. When Guns N' Roses joined the tour in November, Nikki Sixx and Guns N' Roses guitarist Slash had already formed a friendship built on a shared set of priorities. According to the Crue Time fan tour chronology, a detailed log compiled from period interviews and accounts, on November 7th, after a show in New Orleans, the two headed into the French Quarter together. They moved through bars until the early hours of the morning. One venue apparently turned them away on account of something Sixx had done to the owner's girlfriend the last time he was in town. A couple of nights later, on a night off in the same city, they were at the hotel bar, hours of drinking, until things escalated into a late-night wrestling match in the lobby. According to that same fan account, Sixx fell on top of Slash during the scuffle. The next morning, Slash woke up and something felt wrong. Doctors reportedly told him he had dislocated vertebrae in his neck. There Slash was, injured in a hotel, wrestling Nikki Sixx at 3 in the morning. According to those accounts, this was not a particularly unusual week on the Girls, Girls, Girls tour. This was just November. By the end of 1987, even the people whose job it was to manage Mötley Crüe had started to get genuinely scared. The plan had been to take the tour to Europe in early 1988. A full run of arena dates across the continent. Under any normal circumstances, for any normal band, it would have been the next logical step. But manager Doc McGee looked at the state of the 4 men in his care and made a call that had nothing to do with logistics. He canceled the European tour, not scheduling conflicts, not venue issues. According to multiple published accounts of that period, including details from The Dirt, McGee and his partner, Doug Thaler, canceled it because they genuinely believed some of the band might not come back. A tour that had sold out arenas coast to coast. That had put 2 of the biggest acts of the era on the same bill. It ended, not with a finale, but with a quiet decision that the risk was simply too great. And all 4 members of Motley Crüe entered rehab. What came next was the part nobody saw coming. A band that had spent the better part of 2 years barely holding itself together, that had taken 4 months to make an album that should have taken 2, that had toured behind a dealer in a car called Dealer, got sober, all 4 of them, together, and went back into the studio. What they recorded there was Dr. Feelgood, their first #1 album, the record that cemented everything, produced clean, focused, and somehow more dangerous sounding than anything they'd made before. It stayed on the charts for 114 weeks. Tommy Lee has said he loves the Girls, Girls, Girls album, considers it a classic, and honestly, he's not wrong. It is a classic. But it's a classic that nearly didn't get made. By 4 people who were coming apart at the seams, somehow holding it together just long enough to get it on tape. Nikki Sixx once described Mötley Crüe as the family he never had, and somewhere in 1987, driving a blacked-out Mercedes down Sunset Boulevard, scoring dope from a man on a corner, he was also the thing threatening to destroy that family. That's the Girls, Girls, Girls era. 6 months of chaos, a #2 record, a canceled European tour, and 4 people who, somehow, made it out the other side. If you enjoyed this one, hit that like button, subscribe. You know the drill, but genuinely, it helps. More stories, more bands, more legends. This is Amplified Legends. Until next time.